In this video, we are going to work the following problem with ArrayList. It says write a method remove even length that takes an array list of strings as a parameter and creates and returns a new array list that contains all of the odd length strings of the input list. Okay. So start off with the class header. I'm going to call mine remove even, my class remove even length. All right, next up, add the main method header, public static void main string args. And in here, I'm going to create some array lists to test with. So import java.util.ArrayList up at the top. All right, I need to create an array list of strings. List 1. And then call the constructor, right, for the array list. And then I'm going to start adding some strings to the array list. Some of even length, right? Some of odd length. I'm going to get, say, like at least 5 on here. All right, and then make another one as well. Another test case here. So create a new array list of strings called list2. That'll set up an empty array list, and then I will use the add method to start adding strings in there. Okay. All right, next up, I am going to start setting up that method that we have to write. So public static. All right, and so next, I'm putting public and static again because it just makes it easier to call the method from the main method, right? If it were not static, then we would have to create an object and to do that. So, and then the return type, right, is going to be an array list of strings. And I'm just going to call my method remove even length because that's what it's doing. And then for the parameter, I am going to have an array list of strings, right? That describes the input to this function. Again, I'm just going to call this A. All right. All right, and then at the very least, right, let's see if I go back and look at how they say it says our method should create and return a new array list, right? So just kind of like the previous example, we're going to create an array list. And you may say, well, why can't I just operate directly on this array list here? And, you could do that. I mean, first off, the problem specifically says, create and return a new array list. So one that's different from this, right? Um, so remember, we're dealing with reference types here. And so if you alter this parameter in A, you're going to be altering the original list too. And just maybe you don't want that behavior, right? Maybe you want to preserve the original list as well. So that's one reason why you would create and return, right, a new one that doesn't alter the input. When we talked about when you pass a reference type to a method through a parameter and then alter that object, right, in the function, it will alter the original object as well. So again, just avoiding that behavior here. Okay, so then we're going to be returning out, right, when we get through that. So that's enough to get it to where this will compile. And so I'm going to go ahead and add our calls, right, to the test case, or to this method. I'm going to encase them in a print statement, right, so we can see the result of the output. Otherwise, right, we wouldn't be able to see what these methods return without using Canvas, which we probably will use that anyway, but okay. So we can call this now and it should run. And we'll just see two empty array lists, right? Because all we're doing here in the method is returning the empty array list that we create right here. All right. All right, so now what our job to do is to go through and remove, right, all of the even length strings, right, that are in these array lists. So for instance, in this first one, we're going to be removing 2. We're going to be removing 4 and 5. So we should have cat1 as the result of this method call, right, on line 24. And then here on the second one, let's see, that's odd. That is odd, odd. So on this, when we call remove even length with list 2 as the argument, it should remove echo and then golf, right? All the other words are odd length and they'll still be in there, okay? All right, so I'm going to start off like we did kind of in the previous one, right? We are going to have to look at every single element of the input array list, which is A, right? So we're just going to set up that same loop, right, that we've been using for arrays and array lists, that standard standard for loop, right? And all the standard for loop does, right, is go one by one over the indexes in this array list, right? So I will be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then all the way up to the whatever the last index is, okay? And just, it's going to be very similar to what we did. We're going to be copying some elements of A over into the array list out, okay? So it's kind of like copying all of them over, right? And to copy all of them over, right, what I would be doing is doing out.add. That's going to add something to the array list out, right? And what is it that I'm going to be adding? Well, there'll be elements of A, right? So I need to go to A and get those elements out. And how I do that is with the get method, right? And then I will get whatever element is at index I. And since this goes over all of those indexes, then this will copy every single element over. So now when I run this, right, what you're going to see is that these outputs, these array lists that are output from this method are going to be exactly the same as the input methods, okay? So you can see it's not what we want, right? But it's better than these two empty array lists here. And this is, kind of what we'll be doing. The heart of it is copying elements over. We just don't want to copy every single one of them over, okay? So what we're going to do, right, to fix this situation is to copy only certain ones, right? So what I'm going to do is get the element of the array list A. I'm going to get that one and store it in this variable word right here. All right, and then I am going to add a little if statement. So if word dot length. So word dot length will give me the length of this word. All right. And then I just need to check to see if that's odd, right? And if it's odd, it's going to be odd if the remainder, when you divide by 2, is not equal to 0, right? If the remainder, when you divide by 2, is 0, that means that that number would be even. So if I get anything other than 0, that means that then I am going to do the copying of the word out, okay? Here I can do a.getI, right? But I've already fished out a.getI and stored it in Word, right? So I can avoid doing that again and just put Word right here, okay? And let's run that and just verify that that's given us the results that we want. All right, so you can see in the first list, right, it got rid of 2, it got rid of 4, and it got rid of 5, and it only kept cat and 1, right? Because they were odd length strings in the array list. All right, and here in the second example, right, it got rid of echo and it got rid of golf, right, in this array list here. So it's doing exactly, you know, what we wanted it to do. All right, let's run through in Canvas so you can see it in slow motion. I am going to put the cursor here and hit Control-Shift-R and then run to cursor. All right, and then I'm going to step in. We can see how this goes. So A is the input. In line 30, right, it creates an empty array. And then I set up this for loop. Okay. Then I pull off the element of the array list A at index 0, right? So that's 2. And then I am going to check, is this even length or odd length, right? This is even length, okay? So the length of this word is 2, so it'll do 2 remainder 2. That's the remainder when you divide 2 by 2, which is 0, right? So this whole thing will be 0. And so the condition is if 0 is not equal to 0, well, 0 not equal to 0 is false, so it's going to skip this, right? All right, that's the bottom of the loop. It increases I by 1, checks the condition. I is less than the size of the array list, okay? And so now it fishes out the word at index 1, which is cat. It checks word dot length remainder 2. Well, word is cat. It has a length of 3. The remainder when you divide 3 by 2 is 1, right? Because 2 goes into 3 one time with 1 left over. So 1 is not equal to 0 is true. So that means that it's going to drop in here to line 36. And line 36 just adds the value of the variable word, which is cat, to the empty array list right here. And so you can see it adds it in there. And that's just kind of how it keeps on going, okay? The next word is 1. It's odd length. It's going to get copied over, right? The next word is 4. It's even length, right? So this line 36 is going to get skipped. The next word is 5. It's going to get skipped. And that's it, right? And so it gets returned. Same thing here on this one, right? When you call the remove even length method with list2 as the argument, then A becomes this, and it just cycles through, right, and does the same exact thing. Alpha's odd length, it gets copied over. Bravo's odd length, it gets copied over. Charlie's odd length, Delta's odd length. The next word is echo, right, which is even length, so that means that word dot length remainder 2 is 0, which makes this false. Right, so it's going to skip the copying in that case. And skip golf and hotel, and then that's the end of it. All right, so that is it for this example.